It's my absolute pleasure to welcome you, say hello, and thank you to you all for joining us for this, which is the second event in our webinar series, Radical Performance Knowledge. My name is Lindsay Rodden. I'm a playwright, dramaturg, and practice researcher with the School of Performance and Cultural Industries at the University of Leeds, and with Red Ladder Theatre Company. But this is not about me, this is about our speaker that we have here today. So we're going to have a presentation by our speaker. I think, Isabel, we're thinking about 45 to 50 minutes, maybe? Cool, yeah. Followed by more of a chat and a chance to bring in your comments and your questions. So I'd encourage everybody, if you have comments and questions during the presentation, please put them in the chat. I'll keep an eye on all of that. And then we can introduce them in at the end. Either I'll do that on your behalf, or I'll invite you to put them to Isabel yourself. I think that's all the housekeeping, really, isn't it? So I would love to just introduce you to Isabel Lima. Isabel is an artist based in Newcastle. Her own family history of displacement is the catalyst for much of her work and her practice, addressing the big themes of identity, of culture, and of place. Her projects are artist-led and in collaboration with people with experience of systematic injustice and oppression through capitalism and colonialism, in particular people who are refugees, people who are seeking asylum. In her current research, Isabel is approaching socially engaged art as a site of production and transformation beyond representation, and contains within its scope the possibility to enact change. Her role as an artist and that of the artwork are fundamentally linked to openness and vulnerability in a constant process of becoming. And that process is relational and flexible, so as to be committed to place, context, and lived experiences. So today, Isabel's going to introduce you to Broken Chords Can Sing a Little, her series of projects in Gresham, in Middlesbrough, over, Isabel, I think the last 5 years and counting.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pass you on to Isabel if you're ready, Isabel.
Yeah.
And I'll say goodbye for now, but please do put your comments and questions in the chat and then we'll bring them in at the end. Thanks.
Thank you, Lindsay, and thank you everyone for coming. And hola Maria, haven't seen you in a while. So I'm just going to start my presentation. Going to share my screen. Let's see if I can make this right. So essentially, I'm going to talk about the work I've been developing in Gresham, which is a neighborhood in the center of Middlesbrough. And I started working there in 2016. The way that I arrived, I didn't know Middlesbrough that well, or Gresham at all. The way that I arrived into that neighborhood was via a commission by the Middlesbrough Institute of Modern Art. So it's a typical art commission, which is very short term, and an artist gets thrown in the middle of a place, of a setting, and to develop work very quickly, and then eventually to leave. That's usually the nature of commissions. So I've been working with people seeking asylum for many years, but this was the first time I got put in touch with an already formed group set of people that wanted to work with an artist. At this time, my practice, this was 2016, so we just had the supposed migration crisis on 2015, and I was embarking on a new research project that I wanted to investigate both displacement in Greece and in the UK. So Greece as the starting point of displacement within Europe, and then the UK as one of the settling stages for people in Europe. And that was my aim at the time, to do that kind of research. But here I had this group, and at the same time, I don't know if any of you remember, 2016 was when the big story broke out of the houses of people seeking asylum in Middlesbrough. All of of them had painted red doors. I don't know if you are aware of that. And people were complaining all the time. And to no fruition until it was released as a news story at the Times. And then all of a sudden it got kind of national coverage. So we decided to make a film together. Initially, I thought that the film would be no longer than, I don't know, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And it ended up being a 60-minute documentary. Because not only we started talking and investigating the housing conditions, but then it kind of spread to actually each individual personal story and the process of seeking asylum in the UK. When I came to this commission, I had a vague idea that I wanted to do this film, and I also wanted to introduce fictional elements in the film. So not just a straightforward documentary, but the fictional elements were important, because I thought that that was a way to kind of have a chance to portray people seeking asylum as they are, genuine as they are, which are people which are extremely resilient and full of strength and full of capacity. And usually they only get attributed the role of victims or criminals. And I wanted to kind of strike a balance through the fictional scenes. So what I'm going to do is just show you, hang on. Oh, why can't? I'm just going to show you a 5-minute edit of the 60-minute film.
Isabel, we can't hear that actually.
Oh,
I know we did in the practice, so
all
yeah.
right, hang on. Let me try something. Sorry. Let me try.
The wise can often profit by the lessons of a fool, for caution is the mother of safety. It is the foe and not the friends that taught cities to build high walls, to keep long vessels of war, and it is this knowledge that protects our children.
What misfortune is ours? We strain every nerve to get to the crows, do everything we can to that end, and we cannot find our way.
And I was one of the first dispersal asylum seekers to the town of Middlesbrough.
My name is Haile Gabriel. I'm from Eritrea. I came here in 1997. Back then I was probably 13, 14 years old.
When I came here, they didn't tell me what's going to happen and how it's going to be.
So it took time for them to think about whether they should or should not give me papers.
I think, first of all, the important thing about Middlesbrough is that it is built entirely on immigration. So I hope and I think we are welcoming.
I was held with my brother, who was forcefully removed and sent back to Uganda.
Immigration detention in the UK, which is quite distinct, is that the UK has not signed the European Returns Directive. And so what this means is that there's no statutory upper limit to immigration detention. So in theory, people can be held in immigration detention forever.
I'm being tortured in detention. I've done 18 months on top of what I'm meant to do. You know what I mean? Imagine every day of the 18 months, not knowing when you're going to get released, what's going to happen to you, what plane you're going to take next, what country you're going to end up with. Do you know what I mean? This is what I've been living like a hell.
A lot of the biggest problems are simply retaining resilience in the face of what can be it can seem like a very arbitrary and endless process.
Mr. Monk, the issue of the red doors has arisen as a result of an article by Andrew Norfolk.
We were not aware of any reported incident regarding giving rise to any issues regarding that red door. There was no reported incident. There hasn't been a reported incident regarding a red door issue received by my company.
Twice they atiraram pedra na janela, quebraram uma das janelas do quarto de uma das meninas. E eles falam coisas. They say things like, because they know that that house is asylum seeker house. I don't know how they know.
But you're telling us, very Pontius Pilate-like, that you had nothing to do with this and you didn't know about it.
You can push people to believe in one way. You can literally push them. You feed them with so much hatred, and then it was not their intention to become hateful, but you just make them to become so. And you use their weakest side, weakest link, to capitalize on that.
Telling us I'm lucky. I never applied for your support. How am I lucky? I don't want to be here. How am I lucky? Do you know what I mean? I don't want £35 a week. How am I lucky?
You buy up cheap homes in some of the most deprived communities, and you are making money out of housing some of the most vulnerable and poor people in some of the most deprived and poor places in our country. That's correct, isn't it, Mr. Mark?
This is basically what happens when you privatise a system that should not be privatised. This should not be for profit. This is a quite ludicrous system. It should go back to local authority-led, where local authorities provide not only the housing, often through the private sector, they provide not only the housing, but the assistance around it as well. This is a fractured system where somebody is making money and other people are picking up the pieces.
So what I forgot to mention was actually, so I did in the film, I also interviewed the mayor of the town at the time and the police and crime commissioner and charity workers, because I wanted to include all the different voices surrounding the lives of people seeking asylum in Middlesbrough. And I wanted to get their perspective. So towards the end, so that those people, obviously, I met them throughout making the project. They never met in person, but then afterwards, when the project was exhibited at MIMA in the museum, I've organized a special screening where all the participants came together to watch the film together. So that included the police and crime commissioner, a former MP, the mayor of the town, and the people seeking asylum as well. So that was the first time they were actually in the room together. Not much happened from that, but just the fact that it brought them together, the people that worked with me throughout the film felt that was a great opportunity, and they had the opportunity to speak to them, to speak to power, let's say. So now we arrive, so after doing the film, obviously the commission was finished, the work was finished, it was being exhibited, and then I could have just let go. But the thing is, the more I got to meet people in Gresham, the more I realized actually, so people were being pitched against each other, but in reality, they were suffering the same problems, and regardless, caused by either austerity or by the hostile environment. So I thought I would love to kind of carry on working in the neighborhood. And but before I go into that, so a little bit of the context, what I discovered at this point about Gresham. So this is how I first encountered Gresham. This was the first images. And these are actually represent more than what it looked like. It represents like how Gresham is viewed either by people in Middlesbrough or from outside of Middlesbrough. So essentially, Gresham is known for a dim spot of the police due to the antisocial behavior, drugs, prostitution. It's known as one of the most deprived areas in the whole country. Had many of the terraced houses that started being demolished. So in 2005, the mayor then, Ray Mullen, came publicly to announce that Gresham was a cancer that needed to be eradicated from Middlesbrough. Obviously, people that lived in Gresham didn't took that very well. And at the time, they started demolishing the houses. So they had the money from the Housing Market Renewal Initiative. But then the financial crisis arrived, 2008. And then the coalition government of the Tories and the Lib Dems stopped the funding for that Housing Market Renewal Initiative, which meant then Gresham was left with half demolished houses, no money to do any development. Families had already been displaced. People that wanted to get mortgages to move into the area couldn't get mortgages, which meant, because banks weren't lending any money, which meant that only landlords with cash could actually buy the properties really cheap. And that kind of allied with the austerity measures and all the social problems in Gresham, that kind of made everything worse. So if Gresham wasn't a cancer before, because of these decisions and because of all these kind of steps, it kind of almost became one. So you can see here all this kind of, can you see my cursor? All these areas of greenery, there were actually all rows of houses that got demolished. So it's quite significant, because if we look, the houses are kind of small, so they kind of demolished a lot of them. So that's when it came to, when we finished the film, Hailey, one of the participants, when we finished the film, he said he absolutely adored being part of the film, and he was very keen to get his story out and all of those things. But he said, but actually what we really need, what we miss, is actually building something. The film was great, but we want to build something. And then I thought, okay, so that's really, so I started thinking of a strategy, a trick, where I could bring different sections of the different communities that live in Gresham together without them realizing that that was the purpose. So going back to the theme of Greek mythology, I also forgot to mention that the fictional scenes were based on an Aristophanes play called The Birds, and those scenes were kind of mapped and onto the lived experience of people in Gresham. And again, so I used the myth of the Trojan horse, and I'm going to just play this in the background whilst I speak about this project. So essentially, I was trying to figure out how can I bring people together, and I settled on the myth of the Trojan horse. Why? So first of all, the idea of the Trojan horse for myself is an idea of taking control of a territory, demanding and taking ownership of territory. And I thought, right, this is exactly what residents would love to do of their own neighborhood, take ownership of the neighborhood for themselves. So it had a bit of ambiguity. So in one sense, the more settled communities in Gresham could see the Trojan horse as a symbol of exactly of all these foreign people coming over and taking what it's ours and taking ownership of our land. And in the same way, from the perspective of people seeking asylum who were just got placed in Middlesbrough through no kind of choice of their own, they could actually start taking ownership of that place as well as their own, as they have the right to be there. And so that's how I landed on the idea of the Trojan horse. So the project mainly had three objectives. So the first one obviously was to kind of bring people together during the workshops. So we'd have workshops where people would come together every week for the summer and build the horse together. The other objective was that then eventually at the end of the project, we would have this horse, which would be a prop to actually initiate conversations once it got paraded into the neighborhood. And the third objective would be to actually become essentially a gift from the community to the community and to be living in the neighborhood. So at the time, Mima was also one of the commissioners of this project, had different organizations supporting, had to seek lots of different partnerships in order to pull out this, this project. But what I started noticing during the workshops happened in Mima, at Mima. But what I started seeing was not that many settled residents in Gresham would come to the museum. And then I realized because they saw that the museum wasn't a space for them. So very quickly, what I started doing was not only carrying on the workshop at the museum, but then doing workshops in the events of the neighborhood. So going into the neighborhoods to whatever events they had. So on this one that we're looking now, it was a gala they have every year of celebrating their community, or into different artist studios or different charity organizations. So I started popping in and setting up the workshops in those spaces in the neighborhood as well, to try to engage as many people as possible. Because the workshops were here at Mima, it meant we had a limited capacity of 10 participants per workshop. And that created a problem that got resolved very quickly. So before that, I made sure that in the budget, even though this happened with very little money, I made sure that I had money set aside to pay every participant per workshop. So their work would be valued. They wouldn't just come for the pleasure of being part of an artwork. So their work would actually be valued. But because we had, because of health and safety, the usual health and safety, we had a limit of 10 people per workshop. And we had like lots of people coming in through the workshop. And then I was faced with being put in a position that I thought, oh my God, I can't choose who's going to be allowed in. But very quickly, the group of people got together and self-organized and decided who was going to be in the workshop and who wasn't. So people that had been in the workshop before saw that a newcomer wanted to come and take part. And then they would say, oh, I've been in the workshop last week, so I don't mind if so-and-so takes my place this week. So that was quite nice how they self-organized and decided who was coming to the workshop. I know that most people, when I spoke about this project, probably thought that I was mad, especially people inside the neighborhood, so in Gresham. The first responses were, they were always saying, it's never going to work, it's going to get burned, it's going to get destroyed, nothing lasts in this neighborhood. And that didn't come just from residents, that also came from authorities and organizations. But I persisted, and also because I found this charity working in the neighborhood, Streets Ahead, who absolutely supported and said, why not? And they said, whatever you need, we can come and help you and support you. And so since that moment on, I've been working with Streets Ahead. Maybe I'll run through. This was the moment, actually. We've been working through drawings for so many months, and then this is the moment that actually we saw the scale of the head. And that's when actually dawned on us what a mammoth beast that was. This was a very, very good moment. There is Hailey taking ownership of the horse as if it's his, because it is. So that was very good. Let me just run through this video. So this is a time lapse of it being built. So throughout this project, I've learned a lot because I ended up having to do production, not only just being the artist, but also doing production, doing all of the different job roles involved. And it was very problematic because I had to seek, so the MIMA was supposed to seek the authorization to have the horse permanently in the neighborhoods. I was always told throughout the project that would be no problem, that would happen. And then last minute, the council said, no, you're not allowed to. So they allowed me to put the horse, they allowed us to put the horse there for 1 month, but inside the car park, not even in the spot we wanted to put, which was to be on top of the demolition sites. Because the horse ended up being almost 7 meters tall. And that height is significant because that's the height of a normal terraced house that got demolished in that neighborhood. So the horse would come to kind of emulate the houses that have been destroyed. So they never allowed the work to be permanent, even though I've argued and presented alternatives and lots of solutions. They didn't want what I'm assuming was the attention drawn to that site because it's been empty for over 10 years. And it's an eyesore, or they say. So that was one of the issues. Other issues were in order to be able to have to close the roads for 1 hour, so the horse could do the procession from the museum to the neighborhoods. Bearing in mind the neighborhood is like 5 minutes away from the museum. I thought that was a service the council would provide, but as anything with local authorities nowadays, they kind of subcontract private companies. So almost towards the end of the project, I realized that I was almost being held to ransom because without contracting that company, I wouldn't be able to close the roads officially or get insurance, or the parade wouldn't happen, which meant that then I had to find more funding, £2,000 to close the road for 1 hour, which was a bit ridiculous. And when we're scrambling for money for projects, it can be quite daunting. So, but luckily, I was able to find it. So we went through the neighborhoods, and then we ended up on top of let me see if we can, on the demolished sites where we had a communal picnic. So once the horse got into there, we all had a picnic, and then people joined in, and as I thought it would, it started drawing kind of conversations and questions. What is it? Why is it here? What's the purpose? And all of this. So throughout making this project, I actually got to meet several people that had stakeholders in the neighborhoods and that had different ideas of projects and things they would like to do in this location of the demolished sites. And so conversations started happening. So once a month at the museum, chaired by Alistair Hudson, used to be the director then, and what we call the Gresham Master Plan. So essentially we joined forces, everyone that had an interest in the area, and to devise a master plan to then submit to the council to see if they would approve, and we could kind of develop all the different objectives. So part of that master plan was an eco-village that would be self-built, and then would have also the community allotments, would have put back buildings into use and form a community kitchen where classes for cooking and also to serve as a cafe, where the allotment would then provide the produce to that community kitchen. Also, we had one charity wanted to build a house for unaccompanied minors, and then in that house they would have the office for their charity as well. So there was all of these different interests, and we put forward, and we were almost a year in conversations with the council, housing association. So all of these stakeholders would come to the table once a month. But then it didn't go anywhere. It didn't work. And in the meantime, Alistair, which was the director of the museum, left, and then so everything stopped. So nothing worked. So, but during those meetings, I met this other person called Chris, and he worked for this other foundation called Oasis. And he was the one proposing the eco build and also the community allotments. And we decided to actually then start small, and why not, given that we didn't have the permission to leave the horse, and they forced me to dismantle the horse. We thought, okay, let's start with the community allotment, and that's exactly what we did. But before then, because time was passing by and things weren't moving, I was getting a bit afraid of that feeling, you know, when you go into a community and something massive happens and then everything gets taken away and that is just absolutely deadly silent. And I wanted to show people that we were still working. We might not be visible, but we're still there and still working. So we decided, we didn't ask permission, we just went one day all together and mapped the real life size drawing of the horse onto the floor, and we just planted wildflowers on site. Whilst all the time we were seeking, negotiating with the council to see if they would lease us the land for 1 year. And then eventually they did give us, so that's what happened. In the meantime, parents, and obviously the more I talked to residents and got to meet new residents, parents started complaining that there was nothing for children to do, and they couldn't afford to do anything with children, and there's no activity. So I approached the Middlesbrough Football Club Foundation and asked them if they wouldn't mind collaborating with me and organize a football tournament for children, primary age school children in the neighborhood. And they were absolutely amazing. They, because they usually run football sessions in all the different neighborhoods in Middlesbrough for children. So every single other neighborhood had teams to represent them, but Gresham didn't have a team. So because we booked this, we called it the Gresham Tournament Cup. I made all the legwork of trying to engage the primary schools and go talk to the teachers and disseminate the information and ask permission from the parents and so on. So when the day came, enough children from Gresham came to kind of form 2 teams for Gresham. They didn't win the cup, but that doesn't matter. It was already a win. And also during the middle of the day, provided catering, like packed lunches for children. And because we had always a spare team, how we devised it was, whilst all the other teams were playing, the spare one would go inside the center and would have a session with a police community officer on racism. And they had a little video to watch, and then they would discuss among themselves what they thought racism was. So that day was really good. I think we all had lots of fun. There was eventually cups and medals. I got a medal. I was very happy. And then part of that process of talking to residents, some women came to me and said, "Oh, we'd love to have a sewing or embroidery kind of session. Can you organize it?" And I thought, well, I can organize it, but just, I hate embroidery. I know how to do a bit. Well, I learned it as a child. My grandmother taught me, but I absolutely hate embroidery. But nevertheless, organize it. So we started. And initially I proposed, okay, we could do a flag, but they didn't want any flag. They had too many rules. They just wanted to be free and they wanted to make stuff. And we thought, okay, right, so why don't we all make a banner that represents the neighborhood, how we see it? And so this is what it came up to. It's still not finished, because in the meantime, throughout this has been going on for years, this banner, and it's never finished. In the meantime, kind of the people stopped coming in, some people. So we ended up just being 3 of us actually coming to every session. And I realized something is, sometimes when people say they want something, they don't necessarily want the responsibility for it. They want someone else to deliver that responsibility, to deliver that job. And throughout the sessions, I kept telling them, I'm not here to teach anyone how to do embroidery. You are the experts. And we had women which could totally embroider, but they didn't want to take on that responsibility. So some people started dropping out, which is fair enough. But I think for me, learning that in the process, that not necessarily doing what people want, it's the best policy if they don't take ownership of it. I would rather people taking ownership of it. So in the meantime, in the background, Chris was negotiating with the council, because by that time I needed a breather from dealing with the council, because I was a bit upset given that not only they didn't allow the horse to be there, but also because I found out there were bets going inside the council workers, bets going of how long would it last until it was destroyed. So some people were betting like it would be 24 hours before it got destroyed, or 2 days or 2 weeks. So that for me was quite upsetting. And actually it stayed there for a whole month. Nothing happened to it. And people were quite upset to see it taking it down, because they loved it. Anyway, so they gave us the lease, but it was the verbal lease. So they verbally told us, okay, we're going to give you the lease. We started doing seedling inside this greenhouse, which was in another community center, seedling vegetables and fruits and flowers and all of that. And then it was supposed to come the time, 2 days before we moved compost to the site in question where they said we had the lease. The council came back and said, oh, no, we're revoking that, you can't go. And then all of a sudden we had all of these kind of seedlings and no ground to put them on. So again, quite disappointing. So what I decided to do was reuse, because when I dismantled the horse, I saved all the wood that we used. So I went back to that wood and I built lots of different planters, wooden planters. And we put all the seedlings in the wooden planters, and then stood one day on the site that they didn't allow us to use. And we started distributing the planters with the vegetables to everyone that came around. And that's when we actually arrived to the later stage of the project as it is now, which I got so annoyed at the local council just stopping us every single step of the way, that then I went to speak to Kim. Kim is the manager of Streets Ahead, that charity I've been working since the horse. And I told her, well, have you heard about neighborhood plan, Kim? And she said, yes. And then she said she tried to propose that in the community forum meeting a few years back, but there wasn't any appetite for it in the neighborhood. But she told me, but we never know. You go to the community forum and you propose that, and let's see how it works. So I did. I went to the community forum meeting. They already knew me from the horse. They already knew me from all the other stuff that we developed. So I went and presented the neighborhood plan as a proper strategy to actually enact some possible change, or to set a vision of actually what the residents want, rather than being imposed upon the residents. And everyone was up for it suddenly. Everyone was up for it. And so we formed the Gresham neighborhood plan. So let me just move on to a different thing. Can you see this? No. Can you see it? You're not seeing anything.
It's kind of frozen in animation. It's kind of skewed. We could see it a minute ago. Maybe if you just reload it.
Hang on. Maybe I've done something wrong. Maybe I'll stop sharing. I know. Hang on. Sorry for this. I'm not very good with technology.
I think you're doing exactly the right thing. Unshare and then reshare.
Yeah. Can you see it now?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right. So let's go for it. So essentially this, I call it an interactive archive. Really, this is a place where we can dump all our work and evidence for the neighborhood plan. And it's always evolving and changing constantly. So we start on the top with, and all the statements and documents obviously are always up for revision and being updated, right? So we start with the declaration of what Gresham is. So Gresham is a neighborhood in central Middlesbrough, is an intercultural, multilingual and multi-ethnic place. So we've got a little bit of context, what actually the neighborhood plan is. Here is a picture of Streets Ahead, the charity, which is placed right in the middle of the neighborhood. Here we've got, so to initiate the process of a neighborhood plan, we had to form 2 steps. So one, we had to constitute ourselves as a group, and this is our constitution. You can access then this in your own time. I can provide a link, and then you can read through documents. So here's our constitution. And another thing we had to do was define the boundaries of where the plan was going to be in. So these are the boundaries that we chose of the neighborhood. So this is Gresham. And then after that, it needed to be submitted to the council. We'd need to go for consultation for approval. And then after, I don't know how many weeks, we finally got authorized to kind of proceed with the plan. So essentially the plan is a policy document which allows the residents, it will be made by residents, and they're going to set up a vision, and they're going to define all the different priorities of stuff that, how they see fit that can happen in the neighborhood. So in terms of roads, infrastructure, housing, business, open spaces, parks, they can determine all of those things inside in this policy document. Here in this one, in this document is one that's got just lots of stats from the neighborhood. So you can just read in terms of ethnicity, types of tenure, housing, employment, all of those stats. Obviously, we're coming up to this year to a census. I'm assuming we're going to have census very soon. So this is a little bit outdated because this was based on the census, the last census. So I'm thinking 2011. Throughout developing the neighborhood plan and having conversations, I actually found out through one of the residents that actually Gresham had something to be really proud of. And that was, in Gresham, was the first settlement house in the whole north of England when the settlement movement began in the UK in the 1800s. So the settlement movement started in London with two houses, and the house in Gresham was the first one in the north. And up to this moment, it still exists in a different form. It's now the community center, one of the community centers. It's called the Newport Hub, but used to be part of the settlement house. Let me zoom out of here. All these post-it notes that you're looking at now, these are actually all the research we need to do together in order to devise a background. That's just for the background document for the neighborhood plan. So, because these, all the policies that we're going to come up with, it means that they need to be backed by evidence. So in this background document, it's where we're going to store all that evidence. So in terms of community infrastructure, anything, urban design, land use, all of those different things, transport, all that evidence is going to go into that document. I started doing workshops designed, geared towards the neighborhood plan. So we start doing body mapping exercises where a small group of residents come together, around 10, and the session is a bit intensive, can last up to 2 hours. And we start, so I'm using this exercise based on the work of another activist and researcher and community organizer called Javier Rodriguez, who's based in Wales. And we start by asking questions. Let me zoom in. Very simply, this is the exercise. So we start by, in the left foot, asking like all of these questions and discussing like, how did the neighborhood come about? What do you know about the history, or how do you felt when you came to live in the neighborhood? Then we move on to thinking what makes us happy in the neighborhood, what makes us angry. And then we start mapping actually what we think the community assets and skills are present at the moment. And we start moving on criticisms that external people or internal people might have of the neighborhoods, our vision, what we would like Gresham to be. And we start moving on onto actually mapping what are the assets that are missing, who are the people that are missing in the space, who do we need to approach, which skills, which partnerships, which organizations. And then towards the end of the workshop, then we set tasks for every single person. So either people can volunteer for different subsections of the plan. So thinking, oh, I'm really keen on green spaces, so I could help out that team to kind of devise a policy or research for green spaces. Or some other person might think, actually, my skills are in transport, or whatever it is. Then people can decide how they're going to be part of the plan. At the same time, we sought collaboration with the Newcastle University Architecture and Urban Planning University. So we had 2 students from urban planning coming to Gresham, and they kind of wrote a report which has a very unfortunate title. So they wanted to do a power mapping for the neighborhoods. This power mapping was perhaps useful for the students, not so much useful for the residents. But we never, that's the issue, isn't it? When you start striking a partnership and a collaboration, you never know where it's going to lead. So they said a place with no vision. I'm not keen on that title, but that's the report they produced. Here are some of the answers that people gave during the workshops. So that's when it was brought up that actually the settlement house was there, that the type of housing were for the steel workers and the rail workers. We had the sailor's trot. So it was like a little road that came from the river and then all the way, if I'm not wrong, towards Whitby, and it gone through the exact middle of Parliament Road, which is kind of the high street of the neighborhood, let's say. So lots of nice, interesting stuff happening. And as we can see, the mapping of the assets and the skills, it's already full of organizations, people, and people are always working to develop stuff in the neighborhood. It's like, but from the outside, it's just people just look as if Gresham has nothing and it's a desert, and that's absolutely not true. And people are very passionate about where they live, very passionate. And the number one thing in their vision for the plan and for the neighborhoods is they want it to be a green neighborhood, a green space, clean and safe for families, and that's it. And that's, I think, exactly what we all want. And I'll stop here.
Thank you, Isabel. That was brilliant. I have so many questions and things that I want to say, but turns out loads of other people do too. So right. I'm gonna be a big girl, and I'm gonna put my thoughts aside, or I'll try anyway, and have a little look at the chat if that's okay. But people do feel free to keep adding in some questions and thoughts to the chat, and we'll try and get through as much as we can. Let you have a drink, Isabel, as well. I appreciate you've been doing an awful lot of talking. But yeah, lovely to hear you talking about it in such detail, but also to to be able to see it as well. Fantastic. I'm not going to invite Nick to read his question out because I don't know if he's able to do that, because I think he might be on the move. But Nick put a comment up. This idea that refugees are weak and the paternalism around the need to protect them has come up time and time again in my work. Could you say a little bit about that paternalistic attitude and what can be done in artistic co-creation to disrupt? And it made me think of Hailey saying, "We want to build something," early on in the film. And I think it's quite telling as well that the council's attitude to the whole area is that at best it's passive and at worst it's self-destructive. But yeah, would you like to respond to Nick's question?
So absolutely, that's what I keep finding when I work with people seeking asylum, is the way that they are approached. It's as if they are this kind of weak beings that need to be protected. They're either victims and they need to be protected. So when I say this, I'm talking especially about gatekeepers, that they don't even give a choice of people working with them. They don't give them a choice, they just decide for them. So all the decision-making power is taken away from the person in question because the gatekeeper is already stopping you. I understand why that happens to a certain level. Needs to be because I figured out that during the migration, post-migration crisis, then all of a sudden there was all of these artists wanting to work with people seeking asylum and refugees, right? And to a certain extent, it's not, it takes a long time and people will make mistakes, but we need to ask ourselves as artists, why are you doing this work? What are the reasons you're doing this work? So very interesting. And also because the images at the time, and usually in media, are always when they want to portray refugees in a bad light, they are the single criminal man, right? They are the rapists, they are the criminals, or they come here to take our jobs. When they want to portray good, they kind of use these stereotypes of the perfect 2.40 family, kind of the professional father, the professional mother, who might be refugees, but they're okay because we in Europe can relate to that kind of life experience to a certain way. So and my question is actually, who is worthy of empathy and who decides who's worthy of empathy? Just because, let's assume like Hailey, right? So Hailey's got a criminal record, but just because he's got a criminal record, why is he not deserving of our empathy, even when he acts morally wrong according to our own codes? And bearing in mind that actually he's only criminal and only has a record because of the circumstances imposed onto him. It's not out of his own choice. But even if it was out of his own choice, even if he wanted to steal constantly and just commit crimes, why can't we have empathy with him? So it's kind of these stereotypes are quite troubling.
Is that connected to that idea, I think, that actually, you know, the circumstances that afford me my privilege are not ones that I made myself. That there's this phenomenal amount of luck and absolutely no effort whatsoever on my behalf. You know, what would I do in Hailey's shoes?
Yeah, because at some point, he was working. So he came as a teenager, unaccompanied minor, right? Years and years ago. And he gone through the process, so social care and all of that, worked fine. And then he got a job. And then all of a sudden, all the Home Office rules changed and they revoked his permit to work and his permit to remain. So all of a sudden, he already had a young family. He resorted to crime. So I think he stole some kind of computers in some kind of office or something. Then went to prison. So, and then since that moment on, it just things like escalated. So he found homeless, he started doing drugs. It's all of these problems through no fault of his own.
Well, criminalizing someone's migration status, criminalizing poverty as well.
Yeah.
I'm going to move on to the next point. Adam asked, did the refugees have input into the design of the horse, or are they working on an artist's design? Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and connected into some things we've talked about before, I think, about the idea of the responsibility of the artist to step up and say, this is what I bring, and this is the weight that I'll shoulder, versus the idea that you don't want to be yet another top-down force imposing yet another structure that you've designed. So yeah, would you like to talk about that?
But in this case, yeah, it was totally imposed, the design. But obviously there's room for negotiation. But I didn't even design, I sent some very kind of sketches, very light sketches to the architect that actually, because the whole problem with this project was, in order to have the insurance, I had to have structural engineers involved, and I had to have proper architectural drawings, because without the architectural drawings, the structural engineers wouldn't be part of it because they wouldn't be able to assess it. And then, so it was like a chain of events. So actually it was designed by the architects, but everyone was pretty happy with the design. That wasn't an issue.
There was that sense of ownership we could see on the film, I think, of the people who made it.
Yeah. I can tell you, actually, I was talking a few months back. So since the horse, majority of the people that were part of the horse, they were yet again displaced. So the people seeking asylum displaced from the neighborhoods to other parts of Middlesbrough, right? Since that incident of the red doors, they got shifted and moved out. And then from then, some of them went on to leave, because what I find with working with people seeking asylum is they never stay too long in one place. They always get shifted about and they always move about. So there's not necessarily continuity of us working together. The same group that existed from 2016 is not necessarily the same group now, but that's fine. But a few months ago, I was talking to one of the people that did the horse, and he was saying, actually, if anything happens to me, at least I can show my children, look what your father has built. And my children will know that their father built that. Even if it doesn't exist in a material form anymore, but at least he says, I can tell my children their father built that. So that sense of achievement and being proud and completely taking ownership of that, that's more valuable than anything else. It's like people feel recognized that they exist, they feel visible and appreciated, that they've got value to add.
Could we talk about visibility and invisibility? I'm just skipping through, lots of lovely comments about people saying how inspiring the work is. A quote comment here from Hope. Local councils should have Hope, do you want to expand on this a little bit?
Yeah, I'm not sure which comment it is.
There's more than one, there isn't there?
Madly trying to find it.
I think what you're saying is that local councils should have pride in a community project of that scale.
Yes, I don't know where it is, but yeah, I thought I was really shocked not surprised at their behaviour towards the project, but I guess I was shocked that they seemed to put up so many barriers to the work that you were doing, just because you'd think that you're doing work for them in many ways, like you're going in and you're helping these communities. It should be work that they want to see done, and I was just really saddened to hear that kind of resistance exists within councils.
I think it's because they realize how they literally messed up that neighborhood, that particular neighborhood, for so many years. Every time anyone proposes to do something in that neighborhood, that first response is, we can't raise people's expectations. That's the first thing. Or we can't, and I'm thinking, people have expectations. It's not a matter of you raising their expectations. Their expectations are there. You just need to meet those expectations. And I think, I don't know what it was. I could just be kind of talking nonsense. It's like guesswork of why.
Hope said in her comment, perhaps they were ashamed because it was drawing attention to those failures, making, I mean, in a way, the kind of the obliteration of a place. There is still something that needs to be seen. You just have to try and see it, what could be there. But yeah, I think this idea of the visible work and in the invisible work as well. I know you've talked to me before about something like the neighbourhood plan, which might not seem as if that is in the scope of the artist, and would be quite an interesting Arts Council project grant application. Love to see that. But actually, when we can see the neighbourhood plan on the Miro board, which feels changing, performative, alive, actually. It feels like it has a sort of what might be a kind of quite dry document that just gets passed around a council office at some point becomes something visible and something tangible. And I think that there's a really interesting connection there in your work, in the kind of the behind the scenes and the no, you will look at this. Does that make sense?
And also other examples of invisibility. So yeah, the neighborhood plan is totally invisible. I felt the need to make this board, especially because of COVID. So we are completely halted in terms of progressing with the neighborhood plan now, because the reason why we're doing it is because we want to engage every single resident to make sure that actually they feel that they contributed towards the plan, or at the very minimum that they gave their opinions of what should be done in terms of policies. And because we can't meet anymore, and there's this problem with not everyone's got access to computers or phones or internet or tablets. So it becomes quite tricky to even doing it online. So it's a bit stalled. So, but I just wanted to put it out there, just so actually if any resident goes and looks at the boards, they kind of realize, right, this is what we need to do, this is what's happening. So at least they've got something visible and concrete that's tangible. So they can look. But this, throughout the all these years of working in Middlesbrough, there's different instances of invisible work, which I think it's even more important than the work itself, which is, for example, having to book meetings with MPs, appointments with some of the participants and take them to the MP to see if they can solve the issues that they're going through, or having to talk to probation officers and saying, yes, this person is doing this project, is a valued member of this project, and it needs to carry on. So it's, or there was this episode was really sad in the middle of the workshops of the horse, which was Sami. Sami was an Algerian person, and he was coming to every single workshop from the beginning. He was there on time, never missed one, and all of a sudden he stopped coming. And I kept asking, where's Sami? Has anyone seen Sami? And 2 weeks gone by, not anyone seen Sami. So I started getting really worried. So, and eventually news came that he just got picked up and deported. Simple as that, just snatched. So, and then also other work, invisible work, which was so highly got to a point, and he asked me, since he first met me, oh, could you write my story? Could you write my story? I want to tell my story. But at that moment in time, I was never able to. And then all of a sudden, one day, I just sat down and I just wrote the story like he asked. So I wrote the story down and I showed him, and he's immediately, he just said, this is what I've been waiting for 2 years. And he waited. And the first thing he asked me was, can we just photocopy it and distribute it? Because it's not just me, like me, there's thousands of people going through what I'm going through, and people need to know that this is happening, because I think people are not aware of what's happening. So that moment of him feeling that his story is heard and he's being looked at as another human, it was like amazing. And it's those simple, small moments that I think the work resides in. It's in giving that confidence and that sense of value, and that they actually belong and they've got.
Harley says in the film, "This is my story and I don't know when it's going to end." And a lot of what you're talking about makes me think about, I mean, it's become a bit of an overused term now, I think. Oh, we're all doing longitudinal projects now. Well, how longitudinal is a piece of string? But I think in this instance, it is really meaningful. And I think we've both had experience of existing structures for funding or within organisations and institutions, not necessarily lining up nicely with years-long projects. And I'm very aware as well of the privileged position of the artist when they're not responding to their own experiences. Actually, you can walk away. You might not feel like you can, but you're able to. And as Harley says, when is my story going to end? And you know, it's not. So I was wondering for you, and I realised as well, sorry, I need a little drink, that the idea of progress towards a goal becomes a really unhelpful idea, actually. But when will it end? And how will you know?
Yeah, I don't know, and I won't know. So in the beginning, when I first arrived to make the film, I thought, okay, my plan for the research project then was I'll make a series of films. I'll make 2 films in the UK and 2 films elsewhere in Europe, and comparing and contrasting and all of that. Obviously, since the first film, all of that went out of the window because I absolutely fell in love with Gresham, and I just wanted to work in Gresham, and that's all I wanted to do. And then the next step was to decide, how am I going to be able to do this? Because at the time of the commission, I was working part-time in a coffee shop and obviously doing my practice the other half of my time. So it's very difficult to kind of have a sustainable kind of engagement in a place. So I started thinking, how am I going to develop the project that I want to develop in Gresham? How can I work there and still cover for my bills and all of that? And that's when I got really lucky and I got funding from Teesside Uni to do a PhD. So that was really lucky because that's exactly what I wanted to do. And that's the only reason I was able to kind of sustain that much time. But obviously my funding ran out like over a year ago, and I'm still working and the work still carries on. And even though I need to submit the thesis and then it's over in terms of that, but then actually the work isn't finished and I don't know when it's going to be, and that's okay. But what I've noticed is it's been a journey and a process of working in that neighborhood, because where I started with the normal structure and set of well within the artist communities, commissions, which is an artist gets parachuted in and then essentially taken away, do a little work, engage a few little people, tick some boxes. Oh yeah, we engage this section of the community and that section and so on. But then it kind of progressed that it's to a point that I'm not leading anything anymore. So even if I retract myself, the neighborhood plan will still go ahead because it's actually the charity now that's the lead partner taking forward the plan. So even if I wanted, I could remove myself, but obviously I don't think I can, and I won't remove myself. So yeah.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that. That's really great. I'd like to move on to a comment from Adrian. Adrian, would you like to tell us a little bit about the Northern Exposure project?
Yes, I can. Sorry.
Hi, Adrian.
Expecting this.
Sorry, totally putting you on the spot. Yeah.
I was just setting up another seminar, but yeah, no, it's absolutely great talk, and I have been up to Gresham and been around the area a bit, but didn't, had no idea all of this stuff was going on, and I've just been checking out a bit the web links as well that Isabel's got. Yeah, the Northern Exposure. This is a funded project from the ESRC that is basically looking at community relations as they've been affected by Brexit in various different locations in the north. And Middlesbrough is one of the locations, along with Wakefield, Preston, and Halifax. Yeah, we're kind of interested in showing both the kind of diversity that's to be found around the north. That the north's not just the location of this sort of mythical white English working class, but has all kinds of other ethnic communities, including recent migrants and refugees and asylum seekers and so forth, and kind of also seeing to what extent there are other sorts of positive stories around evolving community relations that isn't just about the negativity and kind of hatred that drove a lot of the Brexit vote, I think. So we've got a website. It's an ongoing project, and if anybody here is interested in it, do get in touch with us. But particularly, we're interested also in the work of artists and local art institutions and so on in the different locations where there's examples of this kind of work in all of the 4 locations, in fact. And but this is a fantastic project, and I also have other interests in socially engaged art and so on from work in Japan, and it's part of a there's a worldwide movement in some sense of this kind of socially engaged project that I think there's enormous interest for sociologists in looking at how artists build social relations and engage in this kind of sensitive ethnographic type of work in a way that I think actually methodologically is a lot more sophisticated in a way than the way in which social scientists often do it.
Brilliant, thank you, Adrian. I'll be checking out the Northern Exposures. Yeah, for your comment, yeah. And the link is there actually if anyone's looking for it in the comments. Lots of comments about the council's behaviour, but also Adam has had a similar. Yes, it is Adam. Sorry, Adam. Similar struggle. £6,000 quoted for security for a 40-minute procession. Wow, the money going entirely to private security firms. But I wanted to move on to Ali Walsh's question. Ali, would you like to ask this?
Okay, now it's that job of scrolling up.
Sorry, Ali.
Okay. Hi, Isabel. Thank you so much for the chat. I was just noticing that part of what's very valuable in the way you present the talk is that you're sharing the tensions that you have as an artist, the intentions that you might bring, as opposed to the will or desire or capacity of your participants and co-producers to remain involved or to come back, for instance, and then also setting that against those other gatekeepers or bureaucratic hurdles. So I had a slightly kind of complex wording to my question, which is to what extent would you say this informs a temporality of arts and social change? And then what are the issues related to whose vision or energies count to keep projects afloat?
That's a very good question. So I think everyone brings their own kind of importance and energy into the project. Unfortunately, because of the structures to do with funding, for example, I'm just going to talk very briefly in terms of if I apply for a grant from the Arts Council, or if I get commissioned as the artist from an institution, ultimately, I'm the one responsible for delivering the work. So according to that, I've got to set up and deliver the work. The same thing actually with doing a PhD. Ultimately, I got to a point halfway through the PhD, I thought, this is the most unethical thing I could actually be doing in my life ever. And I got stuck. And I thought, oh my God, how am I going to resolve this? Because I'm thinking, she's just like not right. It's not right that I need to write this thesis. It's not right that I'm getting paid for a work that is not just mine, but ultimately I'm the one responsible. And I've made a contract in my name with the university. So therefore they paid me and I need to fulfill my end of the contract, which is to submit the thesis. Simple, not that simple. So it's very tricky in terms of what I think all of us bring very different things to the project. And I think we also need to acknowledge that there's power, it's not going to be equal throughout the whole project. Power is going to shift. Sometimes I have, as the artist initiator, I have all the power. And some moments in the project, I have no power at all. It's all in the hands of other people or other partners or participants or collaborators. So I'm not striving to be a perfect human being operating in a perfect way, because I don't think there is a perfect way or completely pure ethical way of operating. I haven't found that sweet spot. Simply because we operating with each other. So I tend to take relationships on one. So to make things easier, to just think, are we being totally honest and upfront with each other? Because that's the main thing. If you're being totally honest and upfront and saying, this is my vision, what do you think? And this could be me, or could be a participant, or could be anyone else. So as long as communication is open, but obviously nothing is ever perfect. It's completely flawed, imperfect process, but nevertheless, we always, and I'm always striving to get better at it. And so do people working with me. So we're always striving to be better for the project. So I don't know if I answered your question, sorry.
Yeah, that was grand, thank you.
I think Hugh has a question that is maybe connected to that. Am I right, Hugh? Do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I think so, perhaps a little bit. I mean, I also thought that last contribution also about this question of the length of these projects, and I just want to say that, Isabel, that just congratulate you on your ability to keep this going, and draw funding and support from different organisations, members of the community, to keep them up the momentum, because often the case is that it's so difficult or it's impossible to sustain that momentum which is evoked and encouraged through an initial project, but then it's not possible to continue that, and that can cause problems for sort of morale within communities. But I suppose my question was more about if you feel or not, or the degree to which aesthetics plays a role in the actual process of you doing this work, as opposed to the artworks themselves. Is there something artistic about how you go about being honest and being, frank and communicating clearly with people? And what does the aesthetic dimension, do you think, bring to this type of work of essentially, improving social settings?
So first of all, I think that the methodologies are all art methodologies. So that's why even when I say it's a neighborhood plan, which is a policy document, for me, it is an art project. It's not just a neighborhood plan, because it's got to do with the way and the process that the work is devised. And that's totally coming from my experience as an artist. And that's where I drew the work from. And in terms of aesthetics of the other things, so like the film or even the sculpture or the banner, yeah, aesthetics play a huge part for me. I like beautiful things, and I want people to feel proud of stuff, and they want to feel proud of stuff, and also to have like, yeah. So I think it's very important, but more important than the aesthetics of the final project of whatever it looks like, I think it's got to do more with the way that I've been practicing and decided, right, this is a very complex way of making artwork because we're relying on people. So simply trying to pare it down. And so a simple idea, so how can I bring all these different communities together? So trying to distill the idea to the simplest form that I can find. And that's how, for example, the horse also came about, and how the simply pared down idea that could actually communicate both to the different sections of the community, different things. So actually, yeah, so I think it is important.
Great, thank you.
So I think we should probably try and finish at 3:35. So I'm just looking through the questions here. There's still so much great stuff here that we should really try and talk about. Maria asks, I'm just going to go ahead and ask it if that's okay, because it's quite a short and to the point question. Could you tell us a bit more about the importance of the play The Birds and Greek myths in your work? And I guess at the risk of overcomplicating things, I would add to that, yes, the uses and limits of fiction.
Yeah, so The Birds, so at the time that I was going to embark on this film, as I said, we just came out of the supposed migration crisis in 2015, where all of a sudden Europe woke up to all of these people being displaced, but entering into Europe directly through the Aegean Sea. And I thought that was quite funny, given that it's the birth of democracy, like Greece. I was thinking about Greece and the birth of democracy and all the arts and cultures, and who was actually considered a citizen and who wasn't a citizen, because women weren't citizens and neither were the barbarians, others. And so this was my train of thought throughout that moment. And I thought, right, why don't I go and then I remembered the play, The Birds, simply because it's this very, very short story where all the birds of the world come together, and they're going to build a safe haven for them to exist, neither in the land of the humans or the land of the gods, so they're kind of halfway in the sky, right? So they're going to come all over the world and build this safe haven. And that's exactly why I thought that would relate to the lived experiences of people seeking asylum in Middlesbrough. Because regardless of what the systems are in place, regardless of how they got put there by no choice of their own, they still have this sense of they all get together, get to know each other, they check up on each other, they go around knocking on each person's house to make sure they're okay. If they haven't seen them in a few days, they go over. They pool their very meager resources and they cook meals together, and they come together as a group and enjoy themselves, even with the very little they've got. So I thought, actually, let's pick up some scenes of the play and then adapt to the locations and to the lived experience of what they do. So all the fictional scenes, so there's scenes filmed in a Kurdish cafe, which is a place that they go and eat. There's also scenes in the allotment where they go and go and grow vegetables and whatever. There's also scenes in the Home Office reporting center. And that for me was, even though it's the shortest of the fictional scenes, it's the one that I like the best, because it's precisely on the play. It said, so who are you that are coming through the gates of the town without permission? And I thought, oh my God, this couldn't map better than to the people that have to go every single week to sign up to the reporting center.
I love those scenes in the film when they go into the shawarma restaurant and sit down and start putting sugar in their tea. Yeah. These four birds from different places in the world, and some people in the cafe are like, and some people, it's normal. Bean had a question, a comment and a question. Do you want to ask it yourself, Bean?
Yeah, I can.
Hello.
Hi. So, yeah, I was just really struck by, as I think many other people were, just the obstacles that you were facing from institutions that sort of are claiming to be enabling or claiming to be kind of working towards values of inclusion and diversity that are actually then just putting up these barriers. And it just reminded me a lot of Sarah Ahmed's work in Living a Feminist Life, where she writes about being on these kind of equality and diversity panels, trying to get changes made at universities, and they just function. It's almost like when things get passed, they, like, you know, decisions get made, and they become in themselves obstacles. And I wondered if that resonated at all with your experiences with some of the institutions, including the university links that you had.
I have to admit, there was a point during the making of The Horse that I thought, maybe I need the best, most ethical thing better to do with actually we just stop everything and not make it happen. But then actually, because you're working with people, then that thinking and that feeling of I should actually just stop everything turns into rage, right? And it's that rage, and then I think actually I've engaged all of these other people, so I'm not going to stop just because there isn't the support or the goodwill of the other organizations that they said they would be part of it. So I'm just going to keep enduring and persisting in this. But yeah, there were many moments that I thought, I'm just going to stop this right now, and that's it. And we're not going to do it. But I think that those moments happen to everyone that does this kind of work, because everything, despite the best intentions, life is really messy, and these projects are really messy, and things happen. And so being able to constantly adapt and change and steer different directions. So it's not easy, but yeah, but I think we start learning. I think as artists, I think that's a great quality. Actually, we learn very quickly that we need to keep on kind of shifting constantly. Yeah.
I think Ali shared a link recently to a seminar series coming up with Sarah Ahmed. That's right, isn't it, Ali? I think. Google it, guys. Yeah, because I'm running out of time. Could we finish just with a comment from Adam Strickson? Is that okay? Because I'm sure you're all reading the comments as you go along, and so many interesting reference points there. But Adam, just picking up on some really useful sources for theatre and community work connected to refugees and people seeking sanctuary. Adam, do you want to speak a little bit about that? It's quite a nice introduction, maybe, to the next episode in the series.
Sorry, show video.
Huh?
So do you want, Lindsay, do you just want to say a bit more what you want me to say about from my very last comment? Or,
yeah. And I'm just thinking that you're up next, I think, aren't you? Talking about refugee theatre in the
Alison Jeffers
webinar
is,
series.
yes, and I'm the respondent. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just really aware that Greek tragedy has been very important in terms of work with refugees and theatre work in the European context. And I've written about the Trojan Women, which has been done by La Mama Theatre over the past 25 years in contexts working from Cambodia to South America, Brazil, all over, using that myth, if you like, or that story and the structures and singing around that story as a piece of empowerment for different communities. And I'm aware that both Lysistrata and the Birds have been used in similar ways. I don't really have anything to say except why. It just seems that these are very resonant, these Greek tragedies. They kind of offer universal parables, but maybe they offer kind of structures, if you like, almost mythic structures to which we can put all our own experience into without really knowing anything culturally about ancient Greece. It does seem that they're a common thread running through Europe in both professional theatre work about refugees and work with refugees and people seeking sanctuary. I'm sure there's a lot more to be written about it. I've written about the Trojan women, but that's a very particular piece of work over a period of, but amazing because it's over a period of more than 30 years in different communities in different parts of the world, using that story for empowerment, and especially by women affected by war and how they can state their voice there. So all these things connect, that's all I was going to say.
Yeah, and these things don't go away, which again, I think is
They absolutely don't, no.
Which is why the work doesn't end, I guess.
No, it doesn't
end. I think we should end it here. I was aiming for 35 past, it's now 36. Huge thank you to everybody for coming today and for everyone's really thoughtful comments and questions. So much that I want to follow up, so thank you. Thanks to Steve for keeping us right, making it all happen, and very special massive thanks to Isabel for sharing her work with us. Long may it continue. Brava, thank you. Maybe we could do a clap in whatever way you wish. Our next talk is Alison Jeffers, facilitated by Adam Strickson. That is on the 24th of February at 4:30. It's all there on the Stage at Leeds website. But yes, it's about refugee theatre. Alison's from the University of Manchester. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye, and I'll see you next time.